You couldn't access that dimension of command unless you have a practice where you're building an authentic and deep connection to something that is very challenging for people, which is your own vulnerability. Your voice is your fingerprint. It's a fingerprint, it's your unique resonance. And when we sing, both hemispheres of our brain light up at the same time. So the code of the voice is a key, and we can unlock these coagulated parts so that we actually, and what's blocking those things, by the way, is self-judgment, is our lack of vulnerability, identification with certain ego structures that we hold and cling to so much that we don't have that fluidity to be neutral. And that's what something I think that vocal empowerment, the practice of toning, the practice of raging, the practice of growl, like we don't allow ourselves in polite society to have access to those primal things that really give us so much freedom. Our sexuality, all these things are like, we're tight and we need to more often than we do.
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. I am Vanessa Soul, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I appreciate your time and your energy. And I'm super excited for today's conversation. We have guest Michelle Infinity. She is a vocal empowerment coach, channel yogi, and energy healer, weaving shamanic and ancient wisdom into modern leadership. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored and grateful. Thank you so much.
I love asking people my signature question, who are you and who are you not?
I am a student and a teacher of ceremonial leadership, and I am, and ultimately like a healer and a teacher who leads through her own initiations and has gone through a lot in order to be someone who can speak poetically and prophetically around the things that happen on someone's hero's journey or healer's journey. Who I am not is a traditional influencer, even though I am on social media, or somebody who teaches hierarchical leadership or has, is a coach because of marketing funnels or some kind of a way of creating some kind of social hierarchy dynamic that then aggrandizes themselves into leadership, for better or worse. That does not work for me. And and I really feel like I'm being initiated into truth and power dynamics, trial by fire in order to come through it so that I can create circular leaderships containing and leading by examples, containers that lead by example in order to really for, in my humble opinion, create the world that I so desperately wish that we lived in, that our consciousness has the potential for, but we haven't quite mastered how to get there yet. And apparently the road spirals and goes crazy because I thought we were going in that direction 10, 15 years ago, and then it got all wonky. But I trust the process, and I'm still on this path, being initiated in my own ways and walking the talk, a teacher who walks the talk.
That was potent. There's so much in there. I want to unpack some of it, but I'm actually going to, I will circle back as our conversation starts to build. Um, First thing is I love just getting a glimpse of what your life was like before you are who you are today. And I know that you mentioned something about how you were in a spiritual circle and there could have been, or and you can clarify, some abuse and betrayal. What was that like going through it? How did you come out of it in one piece, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically? And yeah, if you could just give us some more insight on that experience.
Yeah, I'll akin it for people to make it like a little bit more grounded for when you're a really innocent, bubbly person and you are in a high school and there's like a mean girl circle, but you don't know what's happening. Like you can't tell people are making fun of you because you're really that naive and honest and trusting. And you're thinking, so then to bring it back into the spiritual dynamic, like when I was in Boulder, I literally left Florida when I was like 32 to be like, I'm going on my hero's journey and I'm already teaching at transformational festivals. But I was living in this little very isolated community on the ocean, like a 5 minute walk from the ocean my house was. So I was drinking a lot of plant medicine in the circle with a very initiated and trained shaman. And the power dynamic that showed up was with his wife, which I wasn't really aware of because I really looked up to them as elders and teachers. But I could feel it, but I couldn't catch on to it because I'm not wired that way. And I'm not a territorial strategic. I just don't think my brain doesn't go there. So anyway, so I'm like praying to the ocean and I'm thinking like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to bring my gifts to the world. I was already doing singing circles and sharing mantra with people and making YouTube videos sporadically. Consistency, not my strong suit on social, but these prayers were in my heart and I went into the world, right? And then what happened was I went into the world, not only the spiritual dynamics of the kirtan, you would think we all pray to Shiva in the kirtan community. We're all here to like, um, I don't know, I don't, what do you want to say? Be in the bhav is what this is so nerdy and spiritual, so everyone forgive me, but like in yoga communities you literally chant so that you can experience ecstasy. There's a longing between the prayer for the divine. So I think, right, in the circle everyone is on the same tip that I'm on. I think that we all sing the songs together, therefore we get the yogic concepts and like live our lives by these practices. I had no idea about like I'm the leader of the festival and I'm in charge of this and like all these little power dynamics that I've really seen in the transformational community that like again, it took me, I would say like 10 years and like going through this like initiation, psychic attack, all these things of like being blown apart in pieces to honestly be like, oh wow, not everybody has your best interest in heart. And I got that in high school, but I didn't expect it in these communities. Does that make sense? And then I think when I talk about being initiated trial by fire, it still happens. I live in Austin. It's the same thing. And as I'm coming to age in my womanhood, in my femininity, I'll be 42 in November. I'm finally coming into what direct boundaries are. No one ever taught me boundaries as an empath. It's something I now teach my clients. When you come from a lineage of abuse, alcoholism, or a toxic parent, all your boundaries are blown off, right? You're not modeled what healthy boundaries look like. And in fact, it's the opposite. And then you, as an empath, could experience codependency, being like, am I okay? Are you okay? Are we all okay? Are we safe here? So all of your feelers get blasted out of you, which these are how medicine women are made, right? So these trial by fires shape the initiation journey. And now I can speak to these dynamics in a very grounded way and model what safe circular leadership looks like, because what happened to me, I will never do to another person in my circle.
What was it like coming out of it and coming to that awareness? You mentioned, and I could relate to this, by the way, so you weren't saying this to shame yourself or anyone, really, yeah, receiving what we're saying. You were saying you were naive. You're not shaming yourself for being naive. You were just giving us a taste of like your awareness, because some of us can be so innocent, and so pure, and we can think the highest of everyone and give people the benefit of the doubt, even as adults. That's not just a thing that happens when we're 12. Um, so yeah, what was it like when your awareness started to shift and things started to become really real and you started to see it for what it was? Was that shocking? Was it disorienting? What was that like?
It was gradual, I have to say. It took a long, long time. I didn't have like one of those moments when it was happening, when the psychic attack and these things were happening in a ceremony that I had in 2017. I had enough awareness that I said to myself, everything started to like slow down in slow motion. And I was like, oh, this is what being traumatized feels like in real time. Like I actually said that I have enough awareness of certain things, but I wasn't like angry at the people. I was more like bewildered. And then I had some energy work done later. Things were removed from me that I was like, oh, that came then. And, so it took gradual time. And the journey of gaining my power back was like a year later, 2018. I was invited to sing the first like initiation of it was in 2018. I was invited to sing in a different medicine ceremony that was private for the healing of one young woman who had heavy metal poisoning. And she was writhing, and the people who were like in control, it was their ceremony and they were doing it, couldn't get her to stop making noises. And she was like having a, having like a spaz attack basically. And something came through me. Now, I am humble enough to say it was either I was being used by a higher force, or my guides are a higher force, or there's a piece of my soul that is a deep even though I'm a girl who grew up in the Fort Lauderdale and went to raves and Nine Inch Nails and all those things, there's a piece of my soul initiation and lineage that I have a level of shamanic command in me that can come through me in the right setting. And that's what happened in this room. And it was the Lionsgate 2018. And I sang a mantra that's very dear to my heart called Asatoma. And it's the first mantra that when I sang it in 2011, when I was becoming a yoga teacher, my whole energy field like exploded open. And I was like, oh, I know this prayer. Like this prayer has been with me for lifetimes. And so it was like a piece of my own soul. And I commanded in the room, and I stood up and I went like towards her and I went, Asatoma Sad Gamaya. And there was a transmission there, and everything, it was like lightning came through me. Lightning went into her and into the room and into my teacher who had invited me into the ceremony because he didn't know, you know what I mean? And everything got really quiet. And so what's coming now to say in this moment is it's actually a fusion of all of those things. It's a piece of my soul, it's my higher guides, and it's some other ceremonial force that we do not know, that when we join together for a purpose, we allow ourselves to become a vessel and those things can move through us. And I think this is my path of initiation that I've been on, which is why it's all about humility and sometimes humiliation in order to be a strong vessel that is neutral to hold true power like this.
Powerful. And what does reclaiming our voice mean to you?
Well, you couldn't access that dimension of command unless you have a practice where you're building an authentic and deep connection to something that is very challenging for people, which is your own vulnerability. Your voice is your fingerprint. It's a fingerprint, it's your unique resonance. And when we sing, both hemispheres of our brain light up at the same time. I make a joke saying that I'm an energy healer disguised as a coach, right? Coaching is a functional format that I've learned because there's so much integrity in working with people in longer containers to be with them as a soul, mature them, and initiate them into their own power. And I do so much with channeling, understanding who people are as a soul, receiving downloads, giving something I would call oracular intuitive counseling. But the way that I have people move energy in their own bodies or deprogram samskaras, which in the yogic basically means your karmic baggage that you're carrying around, is I use an attunement quality where I make people make sounds, or I, like I just spoke to, make sounds into them, even through Zoom, that gets them to move energy that has been stuck perhaps for lifetimes. So the code of the voice is a key, and we can unlock these coagulated parts so that we actually, and what's blocking those things, by the way, is self-judgment, is our lack of vulnerability, is our lack of access to our own let me rewire that, our identification with certain ego structures that we hold and cling to so much that we don't have that fluidity to be neutral. And that's what something I think that vocal empowerment, the practice of toning, the practice of raging, the practice of growl, like we don't allow ourselves in polite society to have access to those primal things that really give us so much freedom, you know, our sexuality, all these things are like, we're tight and we need to more often than we do.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Part of the reason why I shifted the name for this podcast, it used to have a different name when it first came out, but now it's called the Power and Purpose Podcast, is because I realized that we all have a homework assignment right now collectively to start to reclaim our power along with our voice, reclaiming Our voice is something that you just talked about, and something that you're walking the walk, talking the talk. And in regards to empowerment and power, there's so much resistance, shame, fear, all types of things around people feeling powerful in their own bodies, or even accessing that, or even playing with the idea, because they just reject it and think that it's evil. And from what I've been exposed to, what are your thoughts? Why do people have an issue with power?
I'm going to flip it and say the different part, because I was talking about the spiritual community and the field that I'm in. So there's that twofold dance. I'm going to come back to what I would say the client side, where they fear their own power. And then there's also this like aggressive attachment to desiring it and competing for it, which in a funny little way is the antithesis of holding it. And I don't know what everybody's political views are, but just this week, because I just posted about this earlier today, we had the now Secretary of War in America talk to a bunch of five-star generals and basically say, we don't want you to be fat, and like really superficial things to people who hold actual power and make real decisions about leadership. And that parading of masculinity and false power is what is the mainstream identification of what power is. And it's weakness parading as power. And we have that everywhere right now. The influencer dynamic could also be that, because a lot of people that I know in our community who have millions of followers and really understand how to be a leadership in some ways, maybe don't have that inner depth of integrity of what sacrifice or service or humility, those things actually, it's in my humble awareness, every spiritual path, including like the Tao Te Ching, is also about the softest thing will overcome the strongest. And it's only through the release of control do we actually orient ourselves to understand that power is infinite. It comes through us, it's inexhaustible. And if we try to claim it as our own, we get messed with by, all these things. We will basically trip ourselves up or get an illness. And because you can't get there from there, right? And then there's the fear of it. What is the fear? There's a couple crippling reasons. One is because we see people use it in this negative way. For example, with the men. I sometimes work with young men who are afraid of their warrior because they've seen the abusive masculine. And there's so much ache in the feminine for that, like a pillar of strength of the masculine initiated warriors that aren't doing the Joe Rogan parade, like this is what masculinity is, where it's like just like very stiff and like, take your supplements and like raw, that's again, there's a limit to that, versus like a kind and a man who's like humble and not fazed by a woman's power, doesn't have to argue with her, doesn't have to pick at her. Yes, baby, you do that. That sounds great. You know what I mean? Like there's a different sophistication to what power looks like that we are missing in our culture. So people have seen it abused. That's one reason. The other thing is, I think on an internal level, and I can actually relate to this. When I first started teaching shamanic work, 2014, I sang at a festival. I sang at a festival, and I swear to you, the trees, I like sent out a call for the first time. And I felt the entire earth. It was in Asheville, so I was around this giant forest, sing back to me. And it was because of my sincerity. And also, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like a little baby facilitator, right? I had just started. But I did something that in my soul is very natural. And everything echoed back to me like, yes, we hear you, have more. And I got really scared. I got like, I went, oh my God, like that was a lot, right? So 4 years later, I did it in a ceremony and we're good. In those 4 years in between, there were definitely times I was on stages where I was like, sing to the trees command. And like, they were like, uh-huh. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't work for you like that, little girl. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's been a journey of like, we want so much we really got to check our egos, right? And like, where are we coming from when we command power? And I think people are nervous about the way that they will hold leadership, and that's They don't trust themselves. That's the answer.
You just took that last statement right out of my mouth. It all comes back to self-trust. Yes. I mean, that's not the only thing. There could be numerous things, but that's
It's the
where,
core.
yeah, yeah, you and I are on the same page with that. Beautiful. And then you mentioned vulnerability earlier. So how does vulnerability what is the relationship between vulnerability and power? Because most people would not think that power can include that vulnerability. They can think that vulnerability might jeopardize power, it might undermine it, it might be an opposite, so many other things. So, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you're singing it. I can feel that you get what we're talking about. That's awesome. The complexities of the heart, right? Is that humility would be the opposite of power on a polar dynamic scale of the archetype. And through our ability to let go of the need to be seen as powerful, and it takes deep vulnerability in order for us to admit that there are things that we don't know and to be in right relationship to the humility of owning our light, right? We have to be in mastery fully of what we have learned and who we work for and how what our allies are and how we clean and how we have right relationship to whatever spiritual divine you name that works for your soul. That's very important that we're steadfast in that and that we come with our heads bowed, but that takes the vulnerability. I think of I mentioned Joe Rogan, right? Like there's this I loved him for several years and then the last few years it's been like, oh, that's a little strange, of an assertive quality I think that we all that really works well on social media, really works well in social dynamics where there's mm, a mask of assertiveness that there's a tone of voice too that can happen where we're like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm right about these things. This is how it is. That will get you followers more than I'm working on this thing and I'm inviting you. It's not as dynamic. And people love to trust being led or a sense of confidence. And people with depth understand how to navigate between something that looks like it's in control and knows where it's going. And also, the other thing that I say to my clients in indirect is that when people have a level of empathy and vulnerability, they hesitate to speak because they care so much. But it's those voices that we need to have that level of command. Um, and people are also scared, I think, to think of themselves as weak or penetrable. And it's deeply easier for them to tough it out or fake it till they make it and then pray that something clicks for them and then I know everybody else. I think that's why I trigger people sometimes in social circles is because people can see that I see into things and not everybody wants to be seen. And that's because of their discontent with vulnerability. So there are people who are really, on the path to be on the path and they're learning, they're good learners, good students. And then there are people who are networkers and like not saying networkers are bad, but like they're surfing power dynamics and exchanging things. What works for you? What works for me? These are our agreements. Ram Dass, my teacher, my spiritual teacher, who without I would not know anything. He says, the ego says, I'll make believe that you are who you think you are if you make believe I am who I think I am. And that creates a level of safety. And that's
Say
not
it
vulnerable at
again.
all.
Say it one more time. I don't know if I got that all the way.
Yeah. So Ram Dass says that the ego, he goes,
Uh-huh.
everyone's walking around with these mind nets. And the mind nets say, I'll make believe that you are who you think you are if you make believe that I am who I think I am. And then let's be on
Yeah.
my summit. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like let's
right.
make an agreement. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah, beautiful. So many good perspectives that that we really need to sit with, right? When it comes to power, vulnerability, reclaiming our voice, filling into what is authentic for us. And that brings me to my next question. Is there a such thing as authentic leadership? I don't hear those two words together a lot from others. I might have said it, I don't know, maybe when I was channeling, I don't know, maybe if I was referencing a certain person. It's not trending yet. Is there such a thing? Is there authentic leadership from your perspective?
100%. I feel like I'm in a school of it. Last year at Solar Punk, I gave a talk. It's a beautiful festival that we have here in Austin, and it was on authentic power. And when I was in Egypt, I was teaching and I downloaded the 8 principles of authentic power. And I think authentic power and leadership are hand in hand, and it was true power is humble, true power is shared, power is infinite and inexhaustible. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but the point is that there's authentic leadership to me is circular, is understanding the dynamic of well, actually, to be honest with you, I have to credit ayahuasca ceremony to giving me this kind of a download where she was saying to me, as I was experiencing those power dynamics in the circle, I kind of wanted to shy away and shrink at certain times. Yeah. And she came into me one day and said, "You need to take your place in the ceremony. It serves no one for you to like go sit where nobody can see you. It's a circle and it's an energetic geometry. And if you feel, if I direct you or your intuition, sit here in the circle, you sit in that command." And again, that's the same thing as being humble in your walk and masterful in your light. You must take your place in the ceremony because it serves no one for you to shy away from that. And you recognize that everyone in the circle has their place and we're not above each other in that way. But if my soul has, and this is what I wish that I'm longing for in our community, and I haven't quite seen it yet, but I have a few allies. The woman who runs Solar Punk is totally one of them. She has me do the opening prayer. We just had a wonderful conversation today where there are certain initiations that some of us have gone through in this lifetime, mostly others, right? And if we honored that about each other, the weight, the gravitas that somebody holds, then we could all have circular leadership and each person would be oriented to drawing down, we would be infused with drawing down spirit together because drawing down spirit would be the goal. It wouldn't matter who had the highest number of Instagram followers. It wouldn't matter who was needed to be on the poster or on the flyer, it doesn't matter who looks like they're the best because here's the truth of spirit that's really fascinating. When we are, I know this from being a musician, if you are working with other musicians who aren't needy about the spotlight, there's enough space between all of you that everyone will get a solo at some beautiful point when we're oriented. And the mastery, the magic of theater is that cohesive energy where it's not me, Michelle, girl who grew up in Fort Lauderdale in the 90s playing. It's when that command comes through. It's when space opens up. It's when the frequency of my words or my song changes the energy of the room. And I can't do that if I'm needy or grabbing for power. And I wish we all felt that so that we could all be authentic leaders in a cohesive space together with the same agenda of opening our hearts, of orienting to spirit, of being in the highest service that we can for all. May we all win was one of my prayers earlier today thinking about this festival. I was like, I hope we all win. And there's a trust and a faith in that that creates a lot of space beyond personality and beyond dynamics, power dynamics with people.
Yeah, so beautiful. Is there an example of shared power, authentic leadership, authentic power that you know of?
In our world today,
Yeah.
well, the musicianship and sacred music that I spoke to would be one of that. Like when there are people on stage, and we feel cohesive and we are in harmonics, that's something that's why I'm in the transformational festival scene. It's like something that I have seen it and I have felt it and I have experienced it with my peers. It's not, I don't mean to only be talking smack about people. It's gorgeous when it happens. I don't think people put as much weight into it as I wish that we would, because I would love our community to lead with that more than it does. And, I know she's not a perfect soul, but I really look up to Marianne Williamson, the way that she's come in as a and been dogged, like straight up, like people, like, all the women who were the Democrats got on the Vogue magazine, but they left her out. I mean, like, that's like priestess witch wound 101. And she's still being like, this is truth to power, this is how it runs, so I love that about her. I know that Kamala Harris is not perfect at all, and yet I really loved the way she carried her campaign with real dignity, and I felt put her whole soul into it, so feminine leadership in places that are not, they, I mean, it's an uphill battle for feminine leadership in that
Yeah.
way. Yeah. And I applaud women who are taking those steps. To Jasmine Crockett, I love listening to her speak. She's just like, this is how it is. And you are not going to tell me that it's not that, because I have the paperwork right here because I'm a lawyer and I am skilled. And I'm a woman who talks back. I'm from the Northeast. You know what I mean? I'm Brazilian,
Mhm.
Armenian, Italian, and Russian. Like, there's not, I'm sassy, and I want us to applaud that kind of integrity and fieriness. And I think if we embraced, that's another big part of my work, the wild, dark feminine. If I feel like that would heal our whole entire culture. If we embrace the
Mm.
wild, dark feminine, and you can also see it in the way that we treat the earth, if we focused on the earth and focused on her and brought that orientation into balance, we would be in authentic circular leadership. So it's really that dynamic. Instead of power over, power under, it's cohesive energy and wholeness.
So beautiful. I have to tell you that you're the third person within a 7-day span who has mentioned the dark feminine energy in that similar context, right?
Yeah.
So I love it. I love that this is emerging. I've been kind of waiting for that to emerge, but that's another topic. I do have a question about masculine and feminine energies in leadership that we'll get to in a second. But when I asked you the last question about examples, as a clairvoyant, I get, I'm looking at you in the camera, and there's a layered, this happens all the time, there's a layered vision of things that come through. So one of my past lives in one of the Native American tribes came through. And as you were talking, you had 100% of my attention. And at the same time, I totally saw that tribe embodying that shared power, that circular cohesiveness, and that authentic power that we're talking about. So that's also another example. And for those of you, and so many of my listeners are tapped into their past lives, we do a past life regression on Tuesday. That's like our jam, right? So we could always look within our own soul and our own knowing and memory to also get a taste of what it was like. I mean, everything's happening at the same time, but what it was like for us to be in those cohesive circles of power.
I think that you speaking to something that is very sensitive for me, because I don't have Native American lineage in this lifetime, but as I see my guides, that's exactly how I see them. And I see them as these like Native American star beings. And I don't really, and they're very, keep me on a need to know basis. I'm very jealous of channels like Lee Harris, where his guides chat him up all the time. His my guides are like, I'm gonna tell you one thing, mic drop, see you later. You know what I mean? Like my guides are a man of few words, and so, but it's good. It keeps me respectful because I can be very sassy. But I'm really grateful because I hear them when I sing, I see them when I do journeys, and I'm still on a journey, a student of myself, to discover, the power that I walk with, the power that I hold, and understand those really powerful spiritual beings that are layered with us, these invisible beings, like really, like you just said, it's a layer on top of us. It's exactly true. That's how I see it also. Yeah.
Beautiful. And is what are the dynamics between masculine energy and feminine energy and how it's playing out for all of us? So we don't have to only focus on divine masculine and divine feminine, but how How does that relationship work in regards to leadership? And the reason why I'm asking is because leadership in the past, we all know this, it's been predominantly seen as a male position to be in leadership or to lead. That's changing. It's been changing for a while. But how do we navigate this shift?
Yeah, so I did some history on this recently for a course I was teaching. And back in the day when we were nomadic, before we became agricultural, we had more of a balance between, that's when, Ishtar, the goddesses, the goddess of Willendorf, right? It was equal. The Yahweh had a consort called Asherah, I think, Yahweh of the Bible, of the Old Testament. That was written out later when the church and different things took over, and it was like we are going to. And the other reason why masculine leadership happened was because when we started being more territorial, as we became agricultural, we fought over the fertile lands, and then people were trying to claim. And so, therefore, war and the warrior class and all of these things were more important than when we were nomadic. So, I think when we lived more in right relationship with Earth as a totality, there was a balance of power, masculine, feminine, consort, more tantric in that way. And then things changed, and we got warring with our tribes, and then therefore the masculine leadership came into power. And then when the biblical, Christ teachings came into the whole collective, they were rewritten and rewritten. And then the women, even in the roles that they had in the church, which was back in the day, I mean, it even says, I was reading a book over the summer. It's called Rob Bell. It's from Rob Bell, and it's called What is the Bible? And he talks about how the women were the funders, they had the pockets of Jesus. So Jesus walking around, rolled with a bunch of women, Mary Magdalene, the richest, the guy who was I think his name was Hesod, I can't remember, forgive me. He was the guy who was the king, he was in charge. His wife hung out with Jesus and paid for everything, paid for the dinners, paid for the this, paid for the that. And it says it legit in the Bible. And then what happened was the priest eventually, as Catholicism and everything in the church rose, started to take the roles away from the women. And then what happened was the witch trials. And that got nasty for about 1,000 to 500 years of like worse and worse and worse. And that's when the feminine was completely cast out. Women like me, women like you, women with oracular abilities, women who worked with herbs, who birthed children, they were slaughtered. And so that's when we really went crazy. And now we're living only 500 years from that happening. So we are in the
Hmm.
echoes of that. And that's why I do the healing with the witch wound. And I have this beautiful meditation that I hold and run. I'm going to do a class on that because this is an echo in our psyches. Like we're living in the
Hmm.
echo of that.
Yeah. And the astrologist, the ancient astrologers were also included in that one chat. I have to say it because that's present for me these days. So interesting. So, by the way, you're like a wealth of like ancient history in a modern body, in a modern voice.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and you guys know I'm super organized, sometimes to my detriment. And I have a list of questions here I was going to ask Michelle, but Michelle, at this point, I want to see if I'm going to ignore my questions for a second and see if there's anything else on your heart or mind or a message that might be alive for you during this time. Yeah, some type of wisdom drop, download, anything that you want to share, whether it's in regards to things that we've already opened up in this conversation, or it could be something new as well.
Yes, pay attention to what you're consuming on the media because this is a kind of a hijack of where we were in the conversation and all the things that I believe. I see so many valuable, beautiful friends who are hijacked by propaganda, straight up. And I know that their hearts are good. They have really good, great platforms, and I can tell that they are, from what they are posting and what their rallying cry is, and how they're trying to get people on their side because of their beliefs, or if they have a Christian faith, or if they have that, they'll have a part of a narrative that they identify with in a deep way. And then when they see things that are against, polarizing, right? So I'll use a small example. I hope it doesn't trigger anybody, so everybody take a deep breath with me. But there's a lot of people who are of the Christian faith who in the right-wing political party are now anti-trans and think there's an agenda of like people who are trying to manipulate everybody to be transgender or anti-immigrant. And I was just seeing this on a popular podcaster that I know from our community, and he was really misinformed because he was talking about gender dysphoria in a way that you actually can't use that terminology. Like he was like, the dysphoria is in our culture. And I'm like, that's not the right way to use those words. And it breaks my heart because I know he's a good guy, and I know he's his religious beliefs, and I know he's trying to raise some kids and he's afraid of things happening. And so there's a lot of fear being implanted right now on purpose for division, whether you see left-wing politics, it's there too, or or right-wing politics. It's on both sides, extreme negative. I also believe, not to get totally witchy conspiracy, other countries are implanting comments, bots, different kinds of things that are also messing with the American mindset and trying to break us as a culture. I don't think that everyone has our best interest in mind, which is what I thought 10 years ago. And now, as I'm maturing as a woman, I'm also really clear on energies and entities. And I think that some really good people that I know also can get hijacked. I make a joke that Joe Rogan got hijacked by the bad aliens recently because he was like anti-DEI, but okay Nazi propaganda. And I was like, yeah, not, so we have to be really careful nowadays with what we're consuming and who our allies are energetically. As somebody who's a little bit shamanically trained, I understand that because you have to do the same thing in ceremonial spaces. And by the grace of the divine, I have a very headstrong personality, so I'm not easily swayed from what I understand integrity to be. And I feel like my voice and my platform, humble as it is something that's consistent in that. And I feel like a lot of people are getting pulled in ways that aren't good for their psyche. Some of my clients, like even reading too much about what's happening in Gaza, were like really dysregulated. And it breaks my heart what's happening. And we can only ingest as much as we can metabolize and ground, and it doesn't serve you to hijack your own nervous system. You have to stay steady and strong and be the warrior of light that you are.
Yes, absolutely. And here comes the obvious question. How do we do that?
Meditation practice. Meditation practice. We need to ground ourselves. We need multiple practices. It's not just sitting and meditating. I, before this podcast, went into a room and sweated and did yoga, right? I sometimes I do this more, not so much with my personal because I have so much energy with this. But when I do it with one-on-one work with my clients or in a group, I do like rage rituals and dynamics, and I make them like move embodiment practices and throw energy and like sing into their root chakra, right? I make people be wild. You could go to a hip hop dance class. It doesn't matter what practice you do. It matters if you're doing it with intention. And if you're doing it with intention to move energy. Now, here's the hiccup. I say meditation. Sometimes I meet people. They don't know how to be in their lower chakras. If you're meditating and you're like buzzy, 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 and all that's happening is buzzy, 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 you're sitting and it's fine. You're not regulating. We have a whole Sushumna Nadi. We need to like have energy go down into the earth. We need to understand how to let energy escape out of the top of our heads. I have this whole thing about walking as if you have wings. Sometimes we have blocked heart chakra. So I feel like people sometimes are, how do I want to say this, congested, handicapped, like in their nervous system, in their energetic body more than they are aware, because we get addicted to the tension. And if we're on computers all the time, social media, we don't know what it is to be regulated and dropped in. Like I've had several clients, like I have a testimony on my website from a guy who was like, I wasn't even in my lower body, and now I understand how to do that, and that's from my being like, you're not, get down there, right? And pull and help him like activate that. And The reason why we're not that is because we have beliefs that are, it's not safe to do that. I had a trauma happen. I was sexually abused. There's so many different reasons why people are bound inside themselves. If you have a practice, if you know how to regulate your nervous system, if you know how to walk as if you have wings in this world, come into prayer, go to the ocean, which I wish I lived by the ocean every day. I could totally, that's my heaven. Then we must orient to that and recognize that we need more practice than we think that we do. And then we really have like a temple in our whole life where we have an orienting to that. And then we jump on and do emails and then we down regulate. Yeah.
So beautiful. I took a nap before this episode, and that would have been unheard of and very hard for me 2 years ago for sure, maybe even a year ago. I would have took the nap a year ago and then kind of like carried some shame or guilt around it. But that's what regulating is, right? And that self leadership, just knowing what you need when you need it, checking in with yourself, like what do I did my meditation, I did my beach walk. I am by the beach, by the way. I'm in Tulum, Mexico.
Nice.
So I
Way
do
do
my
you?
10,000 steps on the beach every day. But it's, I think what Michelle is really trying to hone in here as a lasting message, and I'm just like her hype man adding on to it, is yeah, being a self leader, knowing knowing what you need, or if you don't know, ask yourself. So that way you can give yourself what you need, or just kind of switch up your practices, dive deeper into them. Maybe it's doing a longer yoga session. Maybe you do an hour every day. You need an hour and 15 minutes. Who knows? Not that length is always going to be the key. Sometimes it's not, but it's really about just checking in. And I think self leadership, in my eyes, and I'll get your thoughts on this as we start to wrap up. I think self leadership is how we really work with the power dynamics that are outside of us. What do you think?
I love that. Yeah, because I'm like, yes. Because for me, being sweet, I have a fierceness, but also being sweet by nature. Um, it's taken me, I would even say this year, I had really good lessons this year. Now that we're at closing the year and I can look back and be like, wow, what good lessons of initiation around things that I can't control, meaning the way that people, and I was, oh, this is funny. When I was in doing the yoga, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about how I've gone into certain groups and people have had reactions to me. My producer I'm working with right now brought me into his like vocal toning, like processing through sound group. He didn't introduce me as somebody who also teaches it. And the first thing when they were like, welcome Michelle to the circle, one of the girls who's like the one of the OGs in the inner circle was like, I'm triggered by you. And I felt like my little heart broke, because I was like, I came into play and I was like fully vulnerable. And then it was not just her, it was like half the circle and they were having meetings about me. And I left after a couple of sessions. So that was like a very visceral experience, right? Not in my control at all. And then there was like the dial of like me being like, okay, what can I take from that? That's happened to me before in school. This happens to me in this other circle. What can I do? And my having to navigate through things that I can't control, which is there are certain people who want power so deeply that my natural authority and way that I be is really challenging to them. I can't take that personally, but I can navigate to women like you, women like my homegirl Angel, who's like, girl, I'm going to have you open the thing, siren call. You're going to sing that song that you're working on with that producer, right? You know what I mean? People who see my power and aren't intimidated by it, honor it and put it in the right place. That navigation for me has been, I'm gonna be 42. I'm still working on it. It's been my entire lifetime and it's been hard, but it's also why I get to hold myself as a generous leader and teach this. Yeah. And initiation through fire, trial by fire, and the impersonal of when I feel that now as a woman who's stepping into my 40s to really be like, oh, that's there, okay, and just bow to it. Don't take it on. Don't make it about me, and go somewhere else. Go in a different direction. Swim my little energy somewhere that I'm appreciated.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah,
where
we
my
are the
voice is
mirror.
honored. What's that?
Yes, go where your voice is honored. And then I said, we are the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we're not the mirror for the challenge. Like I think sometimes you would think like, and that's something that I processed for a long time, where I was like, oh, is it me? Am I coming in hot? Like, is there something I need to orient myself about that? And it was like, no, girl, you're a priestess and you're powerful and you've been ostracized in other lifetimes for the same reason. And you need to
Right.
love yourself and honor what you are and go where your voice is honored too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This is such a beautiful conversation. So much deep wisdom coming through. I feel like there's like a lot of ancient codes floating around for everyone. So this has been so delightful. If you resonate with this conversation, please connect with Michelle. Her links are here in the description box. And in case you're like me and you're always multitasking and listening to podcasts like washing the dishes or walking the dog, I'm going to spell out her website just so it's in your mind, and then you can always come back to click on it. Website is Michelle, and I'm going to spell out her last name. It's Coutinho.com. We also have her Instagram link, her Facebook link, and her YouTube link. So connect with her if you resonate with her energy. And Michelle, I would love to get either a powerful quote or a book recommendation. And then also after that, you can leave us with one powerful way that people can work with you.
Okay, so my quote that I have is, I can't pronounce this person's name. It's Nisargata Maharaj. It's an Indian teacher, and it's wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And in between the two, my life moves. So that is one of the favoriteest quotes that I ever did see years ago on my beginning path of my spiritual journey. And I want to hype my one-on-one 3 month coaching container. Vocal empowerment coaching, y'all, is a transformational experience. I've probably walked over 100 people through it at this point over the last like 5 to 7 years. The link is on my website, michellecoutinho.com, or you can go to bit.ly/soul mentorship and fill out that form. That will be applying to work with me. Tell me what's going on in your life. I do free discovery calls. So it's like, it's really a pleasure and an honor because I feel like whoever fills out that form, I'm meant to have a conversation with if we work together or not. I sit with you, I talk at you, we kind of dialogue about where you're at in your spiritual journey and your path. And then I give you options of mentorship and what that looks like. My whole 3 month container is fabulous. If you only want to do half of it, that's cool too. If you just wanted to touch it and get to know me and then maybe circle back when the time is right, that's cool too. So that is my deepest service, and the freaking changes are profound. So yeah, that's what I would like
Mhm.
to leave you with.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your wisdom. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Honored.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, share it with at least one friend. I'm sure you have one friend in mind, or a family member, or someone in your spiritual community who needs to hear this conversation. So send them the link, and I'm sure they will enjoy it as much as you did. Namaste, everyone. Have a great day.